Welcome to the Amazing Authorities Podcast, where game changers, visionaries, and category leaders share how they built their brands, platforms, and global influence. Your host is Mitch Carson, international speaker, media strategist, and creator of the Instant Authority System. If you're ready to learn from those who've done it and want to become the go-to expert in your space, you're in the right place.
Lisa Anderson is here today, and I'm so excited to have her for multiple reasons. One, the topic you're going to find incredibly interesting. And two, we've had to tick a few boxes to get this interview to happen because we had some scheduling conflicts. I had an assistant that left, and we're here, and it will be worth the wait because Lisa is going to share her dating expertise. Not only is she a dating expert, she wrote the book on it. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Hey, it is great to be here, Mitch.
Yeah, and the title of the show is the Amazing Authorities Podcast, and you are an authority because you literally have written the book. Let's see your book. Tell us about it.
I did write the book. This is funny because in my everyday life, I work a lot with younger generations, millennials and Gen Z, and they're always looking for advice, for their love lives. And I mean, there are a number of things I talk about, but this is definitely one of them. And really, I wrote this book, Mitch, because I feel like I had talked it about 700 or 800 times in various contexts. And finally, people were like, hey, you got to write a book. Well, the problem is I wrote a book. I think I'm the only person for whom the advice in my book did not work personally. So I am still single. So really what I'm an expert in is generally in dating poorly. But I feel like during the course of my dating experience, I gained a lot of wisdom and figured out that I was a train wreck. I was just making disastrous choices. I was dating a bunch of losers. I had friends stage interventions for me, all of the above. And finally coming out of that the other side and realizing I actually got some great things in my tool belt. I got healthier in the process, and all of that to say, now I'm kind of in a position in life where I'm certainly still open to dating and open to marriage, but I'm not going to go clamoring after it like I used to and in a series of, trying to complete myself or be something that I'm not.
Well, give me an example. What are some of the lessons learned? I mean, you've gone through what you've gone through, and what would you advise somebody that's recently out of a divorce? I'm divorced. I'm part of this statistic in America. I think it's 60% divorce rate. What do you give for somebody who hasn't been out there and then to start dating again?
I think probably the number one thing I would think, or I would advise this person is to say, you need to decide what your values are, like what your non-negotiables are. Too many people approach dating, and especially now in a digital world where the whole world is literally open to us. People are going out just trying to randomly meet people, either in real life or online, without knowing what would be a good match for them. And I'm not talking about take an assessment, that tells you what lip gloss flavor you are or whatever, what powder puff girl you are. But I'm talking about true values that center around priorities. There may be some faith elements. There may be priorities around family and children, family of origin stuff, some of your mess that you might be bringing into a relationship. You have to narrow that down to probably your top 5 non-negotiables and go from there. And then, Mitch, I would say second would be to get a team around you. It used to be in cultures and sometimes still reflected now, like a great example would be the Indian culture or the Jewish culture, where your entire family, your community dated this person. But now we've gone into this isolated mode of I'm going to just swipe an app and I'm going to look for people. And I don't know, I tell this to all of my audience, my goodness, when I'm a highly rational person, and when I started dating, I basically lost my mind because I started getting interested in a guy. And then all of a sudden, all common sense goes out the window. I think he's amazing. My friends are like, time out, there might be some red flags. And I'm like, no, you don't know him like I know him. And I'm making all these excuses. Ridiculous. I mean, so I think you got to get a team around you who's going to put some objectivity on your relationship and really on the people that you're even level one filtering out. And I say, in fact, I say this in the dating manifesto, probably one of the most controversial things I say is you get three people on this team. You can have a bigger team and it should be pretty varied. You know, older people, younger people, married couples, people you know and trust and who know you. And then from that, you say, you're going to pick three of these people who really have their heads on straight. They love you. They are wise. They are discerning and they are truth tellers. And you tell them, if all three of you agree that the person I'm dating is a loser, I'm going to cut it off. No questions asked. So you're putting authority, you're putting really some authority and decision making in their hands on your behalf. And that's a tricky space to be in, but sometimes we need that.
Well, it's interesting. Two words come to mind. Well, actually, one word and then two different topics. One is objectivity, because what you were describing is how do you keep an objective mind to looking at somebody? For example, for me, a deal breaker would be a smoker. There's just no way I'm going to kiss an ashtray. Not in this lifetime, not in a past one, or in a future one. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Or if someone was mean or was just a mean-spirited person. It's just I don't have any time for that in my life, no matter how good looking or any of the physical attraction is. Those are deal breakers today, but we also go through stages. And the second thing you described perfectly, and I'm putting a business context on this, is a mastermind. And I've run masterminds, I've been part of masterminds, and you ask the respected members of your mastermind to give you feedback, which is also objective, hopefully, and somewhat partial because they may love you and are out there for your best interest, and we may have blinders on. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
It's
It's
so
how you
true. And
described it. Yeah.
and it's funny because we all act like we're open to feedback, but when it
Mhm.
comes down to practicality around that, very few of us are willing to humble ourselves enough to really take that feedback unless we are practiced in it or we have made enough mistakes or have gone after the real, the capital that we need, the intellectual capital and emotional capital to know what that is. In fact, I wrote an article that I titled, I Want Honest Feedback, but Not Really. And in it,
Right. I love that. I
I
love
talk
that.
about a group of my friends, and these are some of my best friends. And a fellow friend and I, we decided, hey, we would get together pretty regularly. And we said, hey, how about we start going through this thing where each of us takes a turn on the hot seat and the rest of us give you feedback about just things, areas where you could grow because we're thinking to ourselves, like, wouldn't you want to know? Like, the last thing I want is someone talking about me behind my back and saying, Lisa should really change that about herself, or she really needs to get a clue here. And so we offered this to our friend group. And again, Mitch, I'm not talking about acquaintances. I'm talking about
Close friends.
this is like my second level of friendship. Okay, I've known these
Okay.
women a long time. And 2A1, they all said, hard pass. We're not in for that. And it's like, we had more conversation around it and some of them came around and all that. But it's just this idea of we think that we're so open to feedback, but the offense, the minute, someone steps in and it's like, man, this is all for our growth. And the more that you are open to feedback and you are willing to act on it, the more you're going to mature, the more you're going to grow, the more you're going to be wise in a bunch of well-rounded areas, not just your own area of expertise.
So we're Americans. We have an American indoctrination and culture. My eyes widened. I've traveled to 63 countries in my career as
Hmm.
a business person and speaker. I spent a lot of time, believe it or not, in Pakistan, and it just happened to work out that way. In that culture and in the Indian culture, Pakistan and India, it was one country at one time. They are big into arranged marriages, and their
Mhm.
divorce rate is the inverse of American divorce rates. It's very rare to experience that. Tell me what your thoughts are on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's proof in the pudding for that, and somehow it works. I think what they're doing right is they are saying we're going to keep our eyes open as open as we can on the front end, and again, utilize that network of people who know you, love you, have their heads on straight. But then there's also an element, Mitch, of after the fact, once you get married, what does it look like to not put the blinders on, but to realize that you've made a choice. And I'm pretty skeptical of this idea of the one. I think too many people are out there chasing this
That's
elusive,
Hollywood, isn't it?
yeah, the one, like you're supposed to, because then I'm like, what about people who were widowed and they remarried? Like sorry, they have to now choose plan B and take the second fiddle person because
The
the other person,
two, the
yeah,
two.
right. So I'm just like, this idea of the one is pretty bogus. What I think is you make a great choice on the front end and you pick someone who is high quality, who has integrity, who's growing, who's pursuing, wholeness in all areas of their life. And then you focus on that person, and together, as you're both going after individual growth, you're able to grow together. And so, this idea, I'm not a big fan, and I tell this to young adults, and this is maybe countercultural, but I say, it's not. No one wants to hitch their wagon to someone who always is looking around for a better option. You
Oh no.
want the opportunity to grow in who you are, to grow in your relationship, to have, you're going to have ups and downs, you're going to have struggles, we all do, but there's nothing heroic, there's nothing mature, there's nothing sexy about I'm just going to go with this person until they irritate me or I get bored of them and then I'm going to move on. That's childish behavior. That's not adulthood.
How important is religion slash faith to be shared? For example, I know that you're a practicing Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Would you date a Buddhist or a Muslim?
I wouldn't, Mitch, and that is primarily because for a practicing Christian, and I
Mhm.
would say this of any major religion, they're going to
Sure.
probably have a tenet that says this is kind of what it's about, and you kind of have to be this. So for me, it's like, as a practicing Christian, I want a person not only who shares my faith and my values for the purpose of just walking along the same path and being
Hmm.
able to, and of course, this plays very heavily into, folks who are going to have kids and how are we going to raise our kids and what's that going to look like and stuff.
Big issue.
But honestly, I literally believe the Bible is true, Mitch. And because I believe that, I believe that I would want to marry someone who also believes that Bible is actually true, because that's going to play into how we live our life, how we live out this marriage, and ultimately how we walk into what we believe is eternity with God. And that's a value that probably that's paramount for me. So it's just my non-negotiable.
Well, that makes sense. Like, and I chatted before we began, a non-negotiable for me is I'm never dating a smoker. I
Hmm.
don't care if it's Miss America, albeit
Hmm.
Miss Universe. No chance. Well,
Hmm.
Miss America, Miss Universe would be too young for me anyway. But you get my point. Get my point.
Not
Yeah.
everyone would say that, Mitch. So I don't know.
Well, yeah, well,
Okay.
everybody's,
There you
it is
go.
what it is. That's another topic.
Leonardo DiCaprio would disagree.
But they're legal. I mean, that's just
There you
a
go.
preference. I
Okay.
mean, whether it's age appropriate, that's another discussion. And and I spent some time in Pakistan because I was writing a book on one of the religious leaders of the country, which never came to fruition for an interesting reason. But I was over there and experienced something. I read the Holy Quran cover to cover while I was there. I'm a speed reader and I was curious. I cannot judge a religion or a people unless I experience it. A learned person reads himself or herself and is informed before you express an opinion. And I found in that text or religious document striking similarities to the King James Version Bible, which I've also read, being raised Christian myself. More similarities than dissimilarities. Yet, if you don't believe according to their way, we're infidels.
Hmm.
It's interesting. And
Hmm.
and what do you say about Christians who then say, if you don't believe our way, you're not going to heaven?
Sure. Yeah. And I ultimately think it comes down to who we pick or who we say is God and what he says about himself. So, because I believe the God of the Bible and specifically Jesus Christ as he's revealed himself, I
Sure.
have to take, yeah, I think we too often set it up as these religious adherents versus these religious adherents. And the only thing we can agree on about all of us is that we're imperfect. We don't have a full picture. We don't know what we're talking about. Just yelled at a family member earlier today. So clearly I'm not perfect. So, I mean, I have no authority to set myself up as like, I know all the things, but I truly do believe that the God of the Bible has revealed himself in creation, in his word, all of that. And again, I have friends of all faiths, so I'm not going to say, let me decide for you, but I always ask them, hey, check this out. See what God has said about himself. I think there's a supernatural component to it as well, in that I truly believe that God intersects with our lives and shows us his truth, again, reveals himself. And for those who are humble and willing and open to receive that, to understand that, I think, the Bible promises that anyone who seeks me will find me if he seeks me with all his heart. And so I'm not here to say like, okay, I'm going to prove all the ways that XYZ religion is incorrect. I mean, I would probably argue that there are some proofs for Christianity for sure. But that said, I think it's more a matter of let God be God, let God speak for himself. I have a background in public relations, and I always say the one person who doesn't need PR is God. He can pretty much speak for himself. He can do his own campaign. He doesn't need me yammering on about all the things. But I truly want to, as I walk out my faith and as I look to him, I'm just saying, man, if I believe the Bible's true, then what does that mean for me? What does that mean for the way that I frame the world? And that's kind of how I have to walk forward.
Well, so your faith is really your core, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think it's absolutely transformative. So again, rather than me just saying, I'm going to pick God sounds convincing enough. So I'm just going to, take this little piece of what the Bible says or this piece. I truly believe that I was given a new heart by God himself that allows me with right eyes to see God. And as a result, that transformative experience, the Bible says if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation, literally. I believe that was a transformative experience that now allows me to live rightly with new eyes and experience him in a great way.
What are you doing today? You've got to tell us a little bit about your background and how you're helping people today, because I think you're all about your mission.
I am. And, it's neat because I've been able to, for the past, I feel like I started out, Mitch, trying to craft this amazing career for myself and figuring out all the things. And I'd originally planned on going to Yale, and I made it through the interview process and all this stuff. I kind of got knocked on my butt when I didn't, they wanted me to retake my SATs because my math score wasn't high enough. Here I am, a young late teen, and I'm freaking out. And what am I going to do for college? All that to say, I got into the world of communications, journalism in particular, started doing some writing, transitioned into PR. And then while I was leading the PR team for a large nonprofit, I started hosting this show called The Boundless Show. And it was really the team that was running Boundless at the time that came to me. And it was a show that they wanted to start for young adults. And, you and I obviously have talked a little bit about podcasting. This was, Mitch, January of 2008. There weren't many people podcasting.
Was this a podcast show? Just to clarify, was it a radio show or a podcast show?
It started as a podcast, and then about 5 years later, we added radio, and we got syndicated on about 250, 60 stations.
Bravo. So, that's a big deal. Was that through iHeart? Something like, was it iHeart Radio syndication?
Just through a number of different places, some Christian radio networks, some faith-based, elements, all of that, all the things. So a few international radio stations, but primarily US. So with that, I think the team came to me because they knew it was they wanted to do it for young adults. And of course, most 20 and 30 somethings, I actually was a young adult at the time. Most 20 and 30 somethings are single. They're trying to figure out all these big life decisions in a very, transition heavy era of their lives. So, what does that look like for dating and relationships and possibly marriage? What does that look like for picking your education, for picking your career, all of that? So, these guys were running it came to me and they said, Lisa, you're single, you like to talk, you're willing to kind of share all your stuff and just how you're failing generally. That's me editorializing. That's how I interpreted it. And they said, why don't you host this show? And I did. And that has been 17 years now of hosting the Boundless Show.
It's still
Uh,
active.
so, still, in fact, it's funny you ask because we just did our last show last week, Mitch. So, Boundless just got finished. My organization that I work for decided to discontinue this portion of what they do and focus on some other stuff. And so, I have been doing it forever, and I might continue podcasting in another format, but I'm in like a very pivotal moment in my own career of figuring out what is next. And so this show, I mean, honestly, it not only the show, but then 2 years later, I moved over and took on this entire nonprofit ministry called Boundless within my organization. And our goal is to help young adults grow up, kind of own their faith, date with purpose, prepare for marriage and family if that's what they're meant to do. We take a look at the culture. We help them put reasonable eyes on that for living, maturely in the face of what's going on. Just building great healthy habits that will ultimately make them adults and not just kids who can't decide for themselves, who can't take ownership of their own actions and responsibilities. So that's been a huge privilege because, man, I get to see firsthand. I mean, I have, like, for example, now that the show has been ending, we have a guest book and we have like 200 plus entries on that now with young adults who have said, like, man, Lisa, because of this show, I left an abusive relationship. Or because of this show, I learned how to do a budget. Or I learned how to have a conversation with my parents as an adult instead of just using them, for cash or for a place to stay or whatever. So it's been really rewarding.
Have you thought about writing a compilation book of all of these guests or the ones that would love to participate? I mean, to share people learn and grow
Yeah.
through stories. And I
Yeah.
think you've got all those stories. And it to me, the immediate thought was anthology,
So true.
compilation, maybe volumes, because if you've got 200 plus people, that
Yeah.
speaks to a lot of learning and helping. If I look at
Yeah.
it in the context of helping people learn through
Well,
others.
and even as I think of, obviously my main audience is going to be the younger adult. And so we've created a community for them because so many young adults feel kind of disenfranchised, whether in the church or elsewhere in their communities, even in their own families. But another sub audience that has been really fun is like parents and grandparents of young adults, because they'll listen to the show and say, I need to figure out what my 20 something is thinking because we have a generational gap. And I love talking about generations. We have this gap and I don't know how to relate to them, or I feel we're drifting apart, or I feel, and so, they'll write in, they're like, I listen to your podcast every week on my walk or on my way to pickleball. And so it's all these boomers and others who are just excited to get to know their younger adults in their lives a little bit better.
A lot of people watch my shorts even more than the podcast. They want these snippets of information. So how people consume information has changed over time. I mean, it went from newspapers to now we're bombarded with data. It's now TikTok information. I think they're reading a book because TikTok talked about it.
Hmm.
And how important was it for you to write a book?
I think it was extremely helpful because what writing a book did for me, in addition to getting all my swirling thoughts and experiences on paper and to have the ability to say, oh, I have this in a book instead of retelling the same tales and stuff over and over again. I think the other thing that was cool about it is it opened up a world of speaking opportunities, of the opportunity to coach, to mentor. I've done so much mentorship of younger adults and just kind of helping them get their heads on straight, helping them, like I said, grow up and mature and not stay in adolescence or whatnot. So I think that's been really great. And of course, it it, I'm sure all of your guests say this, there's a level of credibility to it, to be able to say, not only did I incorporate my own stories, but I was able to bring in a lot of what I've learned elsewhere, including talking to a lot of folks who've made marriage go the distance and saying, hey, what did this look like for you? And none of it can be, there are so many 20 somethings, Mitch, who come to me and they're like, Lisa, just give me the formula. Tell me the A plus B equals C. What do I need to do this right? And I say, there's no formula, unfortunately. For the Christian young adult, we've talked about faith. I have to tell them, you can't crack open your Bible and turn to the book of first and second dating, and get all the formulaic answers. But there are so many great principles, and it starts with getting healthy yourself. It starts with looking outside of yourself. It starts with being about something other than that desperate rom-com person who's just going to be chasing after the next, whether it's the next relationship or just chasing after sex, chasing after whatever. I think that's what's been most important to put in that book.
I can't imagine you not having a show. You're a great communicator. You're very clear. I was a journalist in a past life and a
Hmm.
communications undergrad. I spot a great communicator, and you're one.
Oh.
What is the next show? If you would have to pick one coming up now that this sunsetted recently, what's your next ambition? Because I know you've had these thoughts.
I have had these thoughts. And what's fun is, so the show that I've been doing for so long has been like a magazine format. So three separate segments. It's been pretty formalized in that the first segment has been a, round table, basically, where I facilitate a conversation among young adults. And that's kind of the peer-to-peer thing. The second segment was what I called the culture. And that was me interviewing an expert, kind of similar to your vibe, kind of putting it out there as far as who is someone we can learn from. And then we would do an inbox segment where an expert would just answer a listener question. So getting out of that construct, I can see myself now doing something that's just much more conversational, much more relational. And quite frankly, Mitch, and I'm just going to be honest here, I have so many hot takes on so many things. I just want, even when I talk to people about consulting, I had a friend who said, oh, Lisa, you should get your master's in counseling and go in, be a therapist because you care about people and stuff. And I said, here's why I can't do that. Because I want to tell someone to do something and then they turn around and do it. And therapists have to work with people who just want to talk and talk and talk and not really take any advice. So consultancy and just giving, I love looking at the culture, looking at life, looking at relationships, and being able to parse that out and make commentary on it and have fun in the process and just make people feel seen and like they're part of a conversation. That for me is a blast.
I would see you more versus a therapist, more of a life coach to a group of people and
Hmm. Hmm.
scaling. It's one to
Yeah,
many versus one to one, which could be an exclusive. And I'm thinking business right away, but I think it's a deal of maybe a small group where you take through the journey. And
yeah,
that's what I would see for somebody like you've got so much experience and passion for your purpose.
yeah.
Maybe an overused term, but you've got passion for your purpose. And the purpose is helping these young people navigate the dating and relationship way that is expected of them.
Yeah, maybe I'll pop into the corporate world and talk about like what not to do dating at work. No, just kidding. That would be crazy. No, but what I have done some of, and this is really fun because the opportunity is there, is taking my generational expertise and going into, again, the corporate world, whether nonprofits or churches, corporations, business settings, and saying, man, y'all, you're trying to work as teams, but you have boomers who are working alongside Gen Z, you have Gen Xers who are supervising millennials. How do you understand the unique values and the unique strengths of each generation and maybe some of the pitfalls there? And how do you collab so that everyone feels heard? Everyone is working out of their strengths. Like, you know, corporate folks, if you're not using the digital know-how of Gen Z, I mean, they are winning with AI right now. They're pulling stuff together that is an amazing level of being able to use a digital experience in technology, but they don't necessarily have the EQ necessary to make the right relational calls. They're maybe, showing up. I tell my younger employees, I say, if you're going to work with boomers and you're going to win with boomers, you need to not show up in the office looking like trash. You need to learn how to put sentences together and actually capitalize them and have good grammar and write an email that sounds professional and stop saying bruh every fourth word. So stuff like that is just, I think there's a lot of value for that. And to do it again in a way that is fun and relatable and gives everyone their moment in the sun.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel. I'm a baby boomer. So when I get somebody who's 20 something calling me bruh, I'm offended. I immediately correct them and swat their nose. Say, no, I'm
Yeah.
not your bro. I'm old enough
Yeah.
to be potentially your grandfather. Don't call me bruh. I'm
Right.
not. And I'm not your
Well,
dude either. And
exactly. And I
yeah,
think where that plays out, especially and where you see it, where it can be even more problematic in a work setting, is they want to level the playing field to the point where they're going to show up. They may be interning in your company and they're going to pass by the CEO and try to fist bump him and act like their opinions and their decision making is on an equal level as him. So they believe that they have a seat at the table where they should be able to contribute at the same level. Now, we're all going to do a collective eye roll when we hear that, but the thing is, they can be coached out of that. They can, if they have someone, an older, more seasoned employee come alongside them and give them some reasons for why that's not going to play well, we can give them other alternative ways of bringing their strengths to the table and recognizing that, yeah, a little bit of humility, a little bit of teachability, a little bit of just do the things that are necessary, because sometimes you're going to have to just eat your words, eat whatever, make that happen. And then when you have an opportunity to shine, you will be able to do that. So I love mentoring younger adults and younger employees in that way.
I like the fist bump idea of just say, hey, brah. Uh, no, I'm not your brah. I can't
Right.
even imagine doing that, for example, to my uncle who was a World War II veteran and of that mindset of total respect. No way. He'd be, gosh, aghast at the generation today. I just think of him being this astute Harvard graduate looking at what?
Yeah.
No, hard
Yeah.
work. You earn your keep. You don't get there because you expect it and then you're entitled, dude.
Now, I will say, Mitch, though, that I say that, again, my millennial, my Gen Z employees are going to be the ones who are like, hey, Lisa, can I just go out on this hiking trail and maybe catch up on this later or do all or stubbed my toes, so I need a mental health day or whatever. So they're going to say that, but they are also, Mitch, to their credit,
That's
they're the ones
hilarious.
they're the ones that I can text or Teams at 10:30 p.m. with some kind of deliverable I need, and they're going to show up and they're going to do it. Okay,
Okay.
my boomers have already checked out. They're already streaming something on Netflix, and they're just like, "No, I worked 8 to 5, and that's what I need," and all that. So there are pros and cons. And so again, it's that coaching them into what they need to know to succeed here, and then maximizing the strengths that they do have.
Lisa, how do people get in touch with you? What's the best way to communicate since you're a communicator?
Absolutely. Well, honestly, if people want to find me currently, or what I've done and what I'm doing kind of sunsetting right now, is at boundless.org. If
Hmm.
people just straight up want to reach out to me and shoot me an email, that's at Lisa Anderson Speaks at Gmail.
Mm,
And I'm an SON Anderson, 100% Swedish. So
okay.
Lisa Anderson Speaks at Gmail. And then I'm also on all the socials at Lisa Anderson. So yeah.
Well, that's great. You've been an outstanding guest. Thank you so much for your time and good luck with your millennials. You seem to have mastered them, or at least managed to work with them. And it's been a challenge for me, but I'll have to listen to more of your coaching to understand how to deal with that generation because I'm confused. But so
Wow.
much value today. Thank you so much for your time.
My privilege, Mitch.
Thanks for tuning in to the Amazing Authorities Podcast. If today's episode inspired you, take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps more experts like you rise to the top. For behind-the-scenes access and free resources to boost your authority, head to mitchcarson.com. Until next time, stay amazing.